Now, although I wouldn't go as far as to say that the upcoming events of My Hero Academia are unpredictable, I will say that for a while now, anticipating the content to come with a preceding chapter has been pretty difficult, which for me at least makes new releases that much more exciting. With the previous chapter, some of our remaining heroes who had been involved in the raid on the manor All For One had rigged to explode would convene and contemplate their optimal direction. One that in the end was entirely dependent on Deku as the possessor of One For All. They were running out of manpower across the board. But from here, Hawks would be contacted by All Might as Deku had both encountered another assassin sent by All For One and also defeated them by his lonesome. And after this encounter, All Might would again offer Deku a proper meal as he hadn't been eating, only fighting. But Deku would refuse and furthermore state that there is no reason for All Might to follow him around anymore. The last thing Deku wanted was for someone he cares about like All Might to get hurt or worse, especially with the late Sir Night Eye's prophecy still very much being a possibility. And so he would tell All Might that he was just fine on his own as he is now capable of exerting a power on par with All Might's at 100% without injury. And before All Might could say what he felt he needed to convey, Deku had already left him behind, as unbeknownst to them, at the time, they had a spectator in the way of Hero Killer Stain, a presence that provides implications we have covered in a recent video. These days, questions have begun to swirl about Deku and his multiple quirks amongst the populace. They wonder if he is a Nomu and such, but more than anything, that despite being helpful, he doesn't look anything like a hero or reassuring presence. With this latest chapter, we'd open up to Endeavor contacting Deku and telling him that there has been a change of plans. That at this unhealthy rate, Deku's body would surely give out eventually. But as it turns out, foreign aid was to be on the way soon, and so with the addition of more heroes into the fray, that is more for them to work with on their side. Endeavor would further express that with Deku being such a vital key to all this, they couldn't have him dying on them. But yet again, Deku would tell yet another senior not to worry and express that he can still move and that the villains mustn't be given any room to prepare. What is a pretty silly argument to me, as Endeavor's concern of Deku overtaxing himself was not addressed. I mean, with a response like that, he probably would have been better off just saying, yeah, I'm not doing that, but good to know. But goodness gracious, Deku wasn't listening to anyone at this point, not even the vestiges of the former users of One For All. Many of them would emerge all at once and tell him that his wounds haven't even closed up yet, that he shouldn't be pushing himself this much, a sentiment that has now been expressed many times, but Deku doesn't seem to care very much. And I say this because the moment his danger sense picked up a disturbance, he was off. Deku is like a one-man army right now. The fact that he didn't even respond to them at all is just so surprising to me. But because of this, a meeting would be held within the power about all of this. Shimmer and Nana would regret having placed such a heavy burden on Deku, but Lariat would correct her by saying that with the way Deku is, he was bound to act like this regardless. As Shinomori, the fourth, would say that to Deku, the power they provide him is all for the sake of getting this conflict resolved. That superheroes are those who help those in need. Now the second, who still remains unnamed, would now leave his seat and contrary to the rest, say that the path Deku has taken is in fact the right one. That as the wielder of this power and the collective will within it, he shouldn't be allowed to stop in a situation like this. However, now looking back towards the two users he was familiar with in life, the first and third wielders, he would propose that there may in fact be something they can specifically do to protect Deku. A pretty interesting point that in terms of ability is undoubtedly restricted, as according to what we know of, the most these guys can do is guide the kid verbally, which doesn't exactly sound like much of a protectorate. Whatever this guy has in mind, I'm sure it's going to be fascinating, especially if it is a possibility that expands beyond the known limitations of the vestiges within the power. One For All is often likened to the power of the Avatar from the Last Airbender series by fans, and so hey, a sort of mental possession would be pretty crazy, and something that also wouldn't be too ridiculous considering this is a feat All For One has proven to be capable of on many occasions with Shigaraki. And remember that these two powers are very similar to one another in a number of ways. But past this, we would yet again have Deku enter another fierce scene wherein a number of villains were attacking some civilians. And Deku would easily drive them off and check up on the civilians' condition. And in seeing this ragged figure before them who'd been making use of multiple quirks, they would immediately begin to panic, thinking that he might just be a minion of All For One's. But Deku would be quick to correct this, much to their relief. Thankfully, they were alright and would then go about their business, just as Deku's danger sense would go off yet again. And let me just say that the range and acuity of this quirk is just incredible. But in the transition to this new location, we would be provided a bit of insight into Deku's current thoughts. First of all, he didn't want to burden anyone. And this is something Deku has expressed intentions towards many times now, and eventually, he will have to learn that it is okay to ask for and accept help. He would question what All For One's plan was and where he was hiding, of course, and then think about taking down Shigaraki and the League. He wouldn't allow them to hurt anyone else, and to make sure of that, he needed to master One For All in its entirety. That way, people wouldn't have to live in a constant state of fear as they do now. Meanwhile, this guy would casually leap towards and engage in battle against a massive aquatic villain. After this, he would enter a forest and swiftly eat a bar of food. A far cry from a proper meal, but nourishment all the same. Deku would continue to fight battle after battle, all while thinking of everyone dear to him. Everything he was doing and intended to accomplish, the reason he was willing to push himself to this extent. It was all for the sake of one day being able to smile brightly with his friends again, and so until then, he will endure. Deku would then take us to another location, that of the now desecrated All Might statue, where yet another of All For One's assassins would be found. This figure would confirm that everything was going according to All For One's plan, especially in regards to Deku now being fatigued and wishing for a bit of respite, as we would then see this figure surrounded by many civilians. It seemed like his hunting of Deku was largely for the sake of his own safety. As someone with a quirk like his, he certainly found power and safety in numbers, and so securing his spot on the winning side was a must. Now Deku was able to immediately recognize this villain to be Dictator, another Tartarus escapee. And let me just say that this guy looks like he would be the main antagonist of a Best Jeanist spin-off story. But yeah, knowing that he had been sent by All For One, Deku would hope that this one, at least, would have some meaningful information. From here, the battle would commence as Dictator would send the people under his control to apprehend Deku. And I imagine that with the current state of the world, his quirk is more intimidating than ever, simply because even civilians now possess support items, and deadly ones at that, with their limiters having been removed. These poor people couldn't control their own bodies, but their minds still remain unimpeded. They were puppets. Deku would then give us a bit more insight in regards to Dictator by thinking to himself that Dictator had been taken down by Crust about 5 years ago during what is now known as the Bloodless Surrender incident. Crust, of course, being a former top hero that sacrificed his life to save Eraserhead from Shigaraki's decaying outburst. But furthermore, Dictator's quirk was one that could be nullified by knocking out the user or by providing enough of a shock to those controlled. But again, Dictator was now thoroughly surrounded by civilians, and so Deku couldn't just go ahead and use Black Whip on them. He had to be especially careful. But as Deku was thinking to himself, they were rushing towards him and would begin to swarm. Yet even still, Deku was sure that he would be able to save them all, but fatigue was getting to him. He was tired and unmoving as they took advantage. But just then, we would have Bakugou leap well above the crowd and fire off an incredibly precise AP shot that hit Dictator directly. And now yet again, we would have another subtle look at the second possessor of the quirk, as his previous sentiment would be again conveyed. And you already know that some folks are just going to jump on this immediately and say that there is a direct correlation between him and Bakugou off of this little thing alone. But to close out the chapter, we would have Bakugou looking down towards Deku and confirming to the others that he has been found. And with that, it looks like Class 1A will finally be returning to the story. Now, I must say that Bakugou's expression and face overall here is like the most docile I have ever seen him be. Furthermore, it would seem like this hunt for Deku was one that his fellow students were also engaged in. Now, Bakugou here, beyond his expression, is interesting because if you notice, despite being in costume, he doesn't have his domino mask on. And furthermore, his costume looks to be pretty weathered as well, which is to say that he has probably been out in the streets a whole lot as well, not only taking down villains, but searching for Deku. Now I for one am really curious to see how their interactions will be going forwards, considering how much Deku has changed in terms of his mannerisms and such, but as it turns out, My Hero Academia will in fact be taking a week off of its manga, and so we'll just have to wait a bit longer for more elaboration. But that's fine, because to make the wait a little less painful, we will of course have videos for you guys here on the channel, so to make sure you never miss a thing, be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, and don't forget to check us out over on Twitter and Instagram at PlotArmorYT. And we are yet again doing another giveaway on both platforms, where you'll have the chance to win an entire year's worth of Crunchyroll Premium for all your anime watching needs. And listen, this isn't sponsored or anything, we honestly just like giving back to you guys. So yeah, do all that, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.